This is About Claude, a daily digest of news and discourse about the AI I keep coming back to. Whether you're a budding power user or merely Claude curious, we aim to keep you informed and help you make sense of where Claude is headed. Here's where we're starting today. Sometime in late 2024, Dario Amodei, the CEO of a company that does nothing accidentally, that red teams its models, that publishes 1,000-page safety constitutions, notices something strange happening inside his own building. Engineers are flocking to an internal tool, not one they were assigned, not one on a product roadmap, a side project, built by a single developer, working in what he later describes as Anthropic's version of Bell Labs. Dario asks, "Hey, are you forcing engineers to use this? Why is everyone using it?" Nobody is forcing anyone. The developer, his name is Boris Cherny, just gave his colleagues access, and everyone voted with their feet. That tool becomes Claude Code. And this week, Bloomberg ran a deep profile on how it happened. It's one of those stories that looks inevitable in hindsight, but was entirely accidental in the living. And it tells us something important, not just about Anthropic, but about how transformative technology actually arrives. Spoiler, it doesn't arrive on a roadmap, it arrives sideways. So, Boris Cherny. Let's talk about Boris Cherny. He's working in an experimental division at Anthropic, and his description of it is worth pausing on. He compares it to Bell Labs. That's a deliberate reference. Bell Labs is where Claude Shannon invented information theory, where the transistor was born, and the laser, and Unix. It was a place where researchers were given room to follow curiosity and structural permission to work on things that didn't have an obvious commercial application. Some of those things turned out to be among the most commercially significant inventions of the 20th century. But that wasn't the point when they were being built. Cherny's working on a coding tool, a terminal-based interface where developers can delegate tasks to Claude directly from the command line. It's not glamorous, there's no graphical interface, no onboarding flow, no product marketing. It's a developer tool for developers, built the way developers build things for themselves, lean and functional, and not particularly concerned with looking polished. And here's where the story gets interesting. Cherny doesn't launch a beta. He doesn't write a memo to leadership. He doesn't request headcount or a budget for user acquisition. He just gives his colleagues access. That's it. That's the growth strategy. And they can't stop using it. One by one, then in clusters, Anthropic's own engineers start routing their daily work through this tool. Not because they're told to, because it's genuinely better than the alternative. It's faster. It understands context. And it takes on the tedious parts of the job that nobody enjoys. Internal adoption compounds. And eventually it gets noticed at the top. There's a subplot here worth a beat. In early December 2025, Cherny briefly leaves Anthropic. He goes to Cursor, which at the time is the hottest AI coding startup in the market, growing like wildfire, roughly 300 million in annual revenue. The competitive landscape is shifting fast, and Cursor is right at the centre of it. He lasts 2 weeks. 2 weeks. And then he's back at Anthropic, heading Claude Code. We don't know the full story of what happened in those 14 days. But the fact that the person who built the thing, who could have gone anywhere, came back after 2 weeks tells you something about what was pulling him. Either what he was building at Anthropic was that compelling, or what he found at Cursor wasn't. Or both. Either way, 2 weeks. File that under character details that earn their place. Now, what happens when you take a tool that Anthropic's own engineers can't stop using, and you release it to the public? Claude Code launches in February 2025, and the initial response is strong but contained. It's a developer tool with a terminal interface. You need to be somewhat technical to use it. Early adopters are the expected audience. AI-forward startups, engineers who are already comfortable at the command line. Then December hits. The holiday breakout is something Anthropic probably didn't fully anticipate. Over Christmas, when people have time to experiment, Claude Code goes viral. And it goes viral not just with developers, with everyone. Non-programmers start vibe coding their own apps. They're building tools for personal use, automating workflows, creating things that would have required hiring a developer 6 months earlier. On social media, people describe themselves as Claude-pilled. Memes spring up about Claude-holism. Scientific American runs a piece noting the cult following around Claude Code's progress indicator. Those little verbs that appear while it's working. Moseying, perusing, discombobulating, zesting. A command line tool developed a personality, and people fell for it. The range of what people are doing with it is part of the story. There's a man growing tomatoes with it. There are hobbyists building entire applications over a weekend who have never written a line of code. And at the other end of the spectrum, and we'll come back to this later in the week, NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory uses Claude Code to plan a route for the Perseverance rover on Mars, from tomato plants to Mars rovers. That's not a marketing tagline, that's the actual user base. Mike Krieger, Anthropic's chief product officer, and yes, that Mike Krieger, the co-founder of Instagram, later explains the strategy behind this. The company's roadmap was always to develop strong coding capabilities first, test them with technical users, and then extend to broader audiences. Claude Code was the test. Cowork and the non-coder version that launched in January was the extension. But the viral moment wasn't planned. The viral moment was people discovering what the tool could do when nobody was watching. Let's talk about the numbers for a moment, because they're hard to overstate. Claude Code hits $1 billion in annualized run rate revenue within 6 months of its public launch. $1 billion in 6 months. For context, it took Slack about 6 years to reach that milestone. Zoom got there in about 4. Claude Code did it in 6 months, and then it kept going. As of Bloomberg's reporting this week, Claude Code is at $2.5 billion in annualized revenue. That figure has more than doubled since the start of January. Business subscriptions have quadrupled in the same period. Enterprise use now represents more than half of all Claude Code revenue. The clients include Uber, Netflix, Spotify, Salesforce, Accenture, Snowflake. The usage patterns are striking too. The average Claude Code user spends 20 hours a week working with the product. 20 hours. That's half a standard work week, spent collaborating with an AI coding agent. And Anthropic says some users are now letting Claude Code work autonomously on tasks for more than 45 minutes at a time before intervening. That's not autocomplete, that's delegation. Cherny himself embodies the shift. In December 2025, he shipped over 300 pull requests, his most productive month in 18 months. He was running 5 or more AI agents simultaneously in the cloud. That's the output of a small engineering team from one person. He said publicly that 100% of his daily code is now written through Claude Code, and a recent analysis found that 4% of all public GitHub commits worldwide are being authored by Claude Code. 4% of all the code being committed to the world's largest code repository. That number was 2% a month ago. It's doubling monthly. These aren't projections, or forecasts, or analyst estimates. This is what's already happening. Now, here's where Boris Cherny says something that I think we need to sit with. In an interview published this week with Y Combinator's Litecoin podcast, he makes a claim that would sound like hyperbole from almost anyone else. I think today coding's practically solved for me, he says, and I think it'll be the case for everyone regardless of domain. He goes further. He predicts that the software engineering title will start to go away in 2026. Not that engineers will disappear, but that the nature of the work changes so fundamentally that the label stops fitting. Engineers become orchestrators. They describe what they need, review what the AI produces, make architectural decisions, and steer. The act of writing code, of sitting with a blank file and typing syntax character by character, starts to recede. And this is the thing that makes Cherny an interesting protagonist rather than just a successful founder. He's not a pundit making predictions about someone else's industry. He's the person who built the tool that's driving the transformation. He's describing what his own life already looks like. When he says coding is solved, he means it's solved for him. Right now, today. He's living in the world he's predicting. That doesn't automatically make him right about the timeline. There's a big difference between solved for the creator of Claude Code at Anthropic and solved for a mid-level developer at a regional insurance company maintaining a legacy Java codebase. The gap between the frontier and the average is always wider than frontier people think. But here's what's worth noting. A year ago, the idea that AI could autonomously write production-quality code for 45 minutes without human intervention sounded aspirational. Now it's a reported usage pattern, The gap is closing faster than the skeptics expected, even if it hasn't closed as fast as the evangelists claim. There's a line from the Bloomberg piece that captures something important about how Claude Code actually works inside organizations. Kate Jensen, who heads Anthropic's Americas division, says the challenge now is proving they can find traction with AI agents for other professions the way they have with coders. Coders, she notes, are a group that's quicker to adopt cutting-edge technology. They're comfortable with command lines, with iteration, with things that break and need fixing. And that's the real lesson of the Claude Code story. It didn't succeed because Anthropic had a brilliant go-to-market plan. It succeeded because the first users were exactly the kind of people who would forgive rough edges, experiment relentlessly, and tell their friends when something actually worked. Developers adopted Claude Code for the same reason Anthropic's internal engineers did. Not because someone told them to, but because it made their work genuinely better. The Bell Labs comparison keeps coming back. Shannon didn't set out to create the foundation for the entire digital age. He was curious about a mathematical problem. The transistor team wasn't trying to build the semiconductor industry. They were trying to make a better amplifier. And Boris Cherny wasn't trying to build a $2.5 billion product line. He was trying to make his own workflow less tedious. The pattern is always the same. The transformative thing doesn't announce itself. It doesn't appear on a product roadmap with projected revenue targets and a launch date. It appears in the margins, built by someone who's scratching their own itch. And it spreads because people who use it can't imagine going back to the way things were before. Anthropic spent years, carefully, deliberately, methodically building safety-tested AI models. They published constitutions. They red-teamed. They wrote 20,000-word essays about the risks. And their most commercially successful product, the one that's now generating $2.5 billion a year and reshaping how software gets written worldwide, started as a side project in a Division 1 guy compared to Bell Labs. That's not a failure of planning. It's a reminder that the most important innovations tend to arrive sideways. Discovered, not designed. And right now, the thing Boris Cherny discovered is still doubling every month. That's all from us, Neil and Claude. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you tomorrow.